Okay. Evening, members, and welcome to the January Planning Committee meeting, Stow Staffs. For the benefit of the public, I'm going to introduce ourselves on the top table. I'm the chairman, Councillor Bob Coe. To my right is
Councillor Robert Duncan, Vice Chair.
And Pardip Sharma, the legal representative to the Planning Committee tonight.
Helen Bembo, Development Management Team Manager.
Kelly Harris, Lead Planning Manager.
Natalie Ioannou, Planning Graduate.
Thank you. So we go then to the part one of the minutes. Members, you've all seen the minutes. Can I have a show of whether they're approved? Thank you. Right, thank you. The next is item 2, which is apologies. I've had apologies from Councillor Val Chapman, Councillor Wendy Sutton, Robert Reid and Greg Spruce. Are there any other apologies? No? Okay. Item 3 is declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? No. Therefore, we proceed to item 4, which is the determination of planning applications. So the first application is it's a non-major and it's application 23-01077 full. And this is at 9 Sandy Lane, Brood. And Ellen, can you do the proceeds? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This application relates to Grain Ridge, a Grade 2 listed property with listed outbuilding. The site is located off Sandy Lane within Brood Village and Conservation Area. It is proposed to refurbish and extend Grain Ridge to provide a 5-bed dwelling and to develop the lands to the rear of Grain Ridge for the erection of 4 detached 4- and 5-bed 2-storey dwellings with associated garages, parking, garden areas and a central turning area. Access to the site would be via the existing access of Sandy Lane. So this slide just shows Grain Ridge, which is the property on the right hand side there pointed out with the arrow. That's the view from the street scene. And then the second view is the property much closer to it up along the driveway, which is shown here. On the photo on the left hand side is the existing driveway up to the property, which wraps around to the rear. And then a view from the front, which shows the existing wall in place and some of the vegetation. Grain Ridge and the associated outbuilding have been vacant for some years, and this scheme would enable them to be brought back into beneficial use, whilst providing 4 new sensitively designed plots to the rear, securing the long-term viability of the listed structures and contributing to the district's housing supply. The new dwellings are required to fund the works to the listed building, and the scheme has been subject to an independently appraised viability assessment. A visit was made to the site yesterday by the members who could attend, and they saw the current condition of the listed structures, as well as the scale of the site associated with the building. So this plan shows you the proposed site layout. So you can see here the existing structure, which is Grain Ridge, and how that will be upgraded and extended, and then 4 plots to the rear. This area is all associated with the curtilage of the property at the moment, and those members who visited yesterday got an appreciation for how much land there is to the rear and how that relates to the neighbouring properties. This is the property itself in its current condition. These are views from the rear. And this is the associated outbuilding, which is also listed in its own right. If the application progresses, this would be an ancillary building associated with plot 1. So would remain in residential use. This is a more close-up picture of the rear of the property. It shows the condition of the brickwork, paintwork and the crystal windows that have been installed and the level of improvement that's required. The picture on the left-hand side shows the extent of some of the garden area and then the boundary to the nearby car park, which is in Stafford Street. Members didn't get to visit the inside of the property as it just wasn't safe to do so. So these are some of the photos that have been taken from the heritage statement to give you an appreciation of the internal layout. It is a statutory listed building, so we would protect the internal layout as well as the external appearance. So this shows you the existing staircase that's in situ and the beamed ceilings that remain. And these are just some pictures that show some of the original features that remain within the attic area, which is the grain hopper, the grain wheel, and the one on the right hand side shows you the trusses within the roof. All that's being preserved and will be reinstated as part of any proposals that are being considered this evening. Just going to go back to the site plan. Concerns have been raised by residents which are noted within the officer report. Specific concerns relate notably to the loss of the trees and the resultant impact on the conservation area, as well as the existing access not being capable of providing a safe access. Other concerns relate to the infrastructure of Brood being unable to accommodate any additional dwellings, as well as neighbour residential amenity. Brood is a main service village in policy terms and is considered to be a sustainable location for new housing. Whilst the proposal would involve the removal of a large number of trees, many of these are considered to be low quality or non-native species, and their removal and replacement with more appropriate species is considered to be beneficial, both from an arboricultural point of view and from an ecological perspective. The loss of the biodiversity on the site will be mitigated by way of financial contribution towards habitat creation within the district, and this would be secured through a legal agreement. There would be no material harm to the neighbouring amenity as a result of the layout provided, and the development also raises no concerns in relation to parking or highway safety. It's worth saying that the existing access would be improved and changed. The wall would be widened and removed and nudged back within the site, as you can see there on that picture on the right hand side, to allow for a proper visibility display, and that's been assessed by County Highways. And in terms of the access driveway, that would be widened in order to allow vehicles to pass and also for a truck to collect the refuse to be able to access the site and turn around and come out in a forward gear. The wall itself is in the main not associated with the age of the building. It's a 1930s addition that's been added on at a later date. The impact of the setting of the listed building has been given careful consideration. However, the fact that this is enabling development and would secure the long-term future use of the statutory listed building has been afforded significant weight. It's therefore considered that there would be no adverse impacts which would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the harm to the setting of this listed building, and on that basis it's recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ellen. We have two speakers tonight, one for, one against. Can I ask the speaker against the application, Dr. Charles Spencer, to go to the lectern, please? Dr. Charles, you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Good evening. Could I draw your attention to paragraph 1.9.4 of your planning officer's report? Here it states that this development, even after multiple revisions, would not normally be considered to be acceptable. It's only being put forward because it's said to be an enabling development. The developer is seeking to use the profit from harmful development to offset the loss incurred in restoring the heritage asset in Grainridge, the so-called conservation deficit. I wish to respectfully challenge that for 3 principal reasons based on good practice from historic England and the National Planning Policy Framework. Firstly, an enabling development should be a last resort when all other options for securing the heritage asset have been considered. No evidence has been presented in the application that any other options for restoring Grainridge have been considered. It's not a last resort and this criterion is not met. Secondly, market testing is required before an enabling development should be considered. The guidance is clear that the asset should be genuinely available for sale on the open market at a realistic price for a realistic time. This is not the case with Grainridge. We believe that should be put on the market, buyers might emerge who'd have the funds to restore it without having to resort to an enabling development. Therefore, this criterion is not met. Thirdly, enabling development provision should not apply where the conservation deficit results from neglect of the heritage asset. Grainridge, as you've seen, has been empty and not received even basic maintenance for over a decade. Much of the conservation deficit results from this neglect. Therefore, this criterion is also not met. There are many other reasons why the proposed development is unsuitable, including loss of biodiversity, harm to the conservation area, excessive height, overlooking, fragmentation and site cramming. I'll highlight just two. Firstly, access. This is long, narrow and challenging. One objector has submitted a tracking diagram with professional architectural software that clearly shows the Mercedes refuse truck used by the council would not be able to enter and leave the site in forward gear. This challenges the assessment by the highways officer. Secondly, the development poses significant overlooking issues for the resident of number 11 Oakleys due to a difference in height. Plot 4 provides a grandstand view into the kitchen and garden. This has not been resolved. In conclusion, councillors, the developer is seeking, after their original application, to apply enabling development criteria to an otherwise unacceptable development without meeting any of the preliminary requirements set out in planning guidance. It is therefore unreasonable to consider this an enabling development. It should be judged by standard planning criteria and declined. So on behalf of myself, the other 42 people, some of whom are here tonight, including our county councillor and our MP who objected to this planning application, I'd be grateful if you, as our local elected representatives, would decline the application for this planning reason. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Spencer. Perfect timing. Thank you. And I therefore call for speaker who's speaking for this, which is David Blackadder Weinstein from Brood and Coven Parish Council. Thank you. You also have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I want everyone to be in absolutely no doubt that the Parish Council has considered this application on more than one occasion and voted to support it in the best interest of the parish. Furthermore, the Parish Council has voted again for me to be here this evening in order to tell the committee that the parish would like to see this development come forward. And there are several reasons why we would like to see this development come forward. There are a list of buildings in response to what we've just heard. There are a list of buildings on the market in Brood, at the bottom of Dean Street, for example, which have been on the market without any buyer coming forward for several years. The idea that this property could be purchased and somehow a Grade 2 listed building could be saved, I think is not true. This is a prominent, beautiful building in the centre of our village, and it needs to be brought back into use as soon as possible. We're also aware and receiving inquiries about, on a regular basis, speculative applications in unsustainable locations within the green belt surrounding our village. I don't feel as a parish we'll be able to soberly defend against those if we oppose 4 homes and a 5th being brought back into use in a perfectly sustainable location in the very centre of our village. We need the people living in those homes to spend their money in our shops in order to keep our shops and services flourishing. There is a clear economic benefit to having 5 new families living in that location. We had previously had some concerns about the access, the widening of the access. But as we've just heard, it's a 1930s late addition. It's going to be widened, and highways are perfectly happy that it is safe, both in terms of passing and also refuse. We are a parish that wants to take control of our future in the national housing environment in which we find ourselves. We'd like to put together a neighbourhood plan. We'd like to allocate sites for development. I do not think we can be taken seriously, both as a parish but also as a district council, if we are finding ways to refuse applications for 4 homes on land in the very centre of our village, when we should be worrying much more about those for applications of 100 homes in the green belts surrounding our village. So there are economic benefits, there are heritage benefits, and it is those heritage benefits that were actually the reason why the Parish Council voted to support this application. We support it on a heritage basis. That is a historic and beautiful building in the centre of our village, which is currently falling into disrepair. This application will save it. This application will provide the much needed new homes that we want in the village. We're not against development, and the money that will come from those homes will help sustain our businesses, our cafes, our pubs, our shops, for the benefit of existing as well as new residents. And for that reason, I hope that the Planning Committee will approve this application in line with the officer's recommendation this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weinstein. Next, we have the applicant agent for the application, which is Jake Sedgemore Stoneley from Architectural Services. And you go to the lectern. You also have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Today marks the culmination of a design process which has been ongoing for nearly 10 years. Previous scheme suggestions have proposed 9 and even 12 units to the rear. This is a prominent site within the heart of Brood and understandably has attracted much interest. The planning department have been extremely proactive in ensuring that each and every concern be comprehensively considered. This was the reason for the previous application being withdrawn. This updated scheme now includes only 4 dwellings, and access from the adjacent car park is no longer proposed. 4 units is the minimum number required to make the scheme a viable proposition and to ensure that the Grade 2 listed buildings are restored to their former glory. They are in terrible condition and have been subject to break-ins and vandalism. This scheme seeks to secure the future of these buildings through a detailed schedule of repair works. This is a critical point. The works to the listed buildings will be undertaken first and prior to any works at the rear. It is fully acknowledged that these proposals include removal of many trees. However, the scheme has been agreed through detailed consultation between the tree officer and accredited independent specialists. Whilst trees are to be removed, these are primarily to the centre of the site. The mature perimeter planting will remain. In addition, a comprehensive replanting scheme will ensure that replacement trees are of a much better quality than those removed. This will include a new front garden orchard, which is very relevant to the history of this site. Similarly, the works will be subject to ecology licence to ensure that no wildlife will be harmed. Bat and bird boxes are just a few of the provisions agreed. Flood risk is also a neighbour concern. However, any approval will be subject to a condition for detailed drainage design. Severn Trent are in support of the scheme as drainage will be enhanced. Currently, the existing site and slope driveway offer no storm drainage outlets. The proposed scheme will ensure that the site can safely disperse all drainage. To the entrance of the site, an enhanced and widened access and driveway is proposed. Speed and traffic volume surveys have been undertaken at the request of Highways. This has led to agreed visibility displays which must be adhered to. The wider access will require a section of the existing front wall to be removed and rebuilt. Again, the details and materials of this work will need to be in full agreement with the Conservation Officer. The plans also show a refuse or fire vehicle plotted in accordance with Regulation B5. This has been agreed with the Fire Service and ensures that the scheme fully meets their requirements, including the ability to turn within the site. In terms of parking, the new dwellings all exceed on-site parking guidelines, including to Grainridge itself. And finally, the properties are set in excess of space and distance standards, and through careful dialogue with planning officers, there are no conflicting windows. The key to this application is that the applicants are fully committed to safeguarding the listed buildings on site. The works to the existing buildings will be undertaken first. As such, we politely request that the committee supports the recommendation to approve. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stoneley. Local member Wendy Sutton, Councillor Wendy Sutton, was on the site visit, but unfortunately she's ill and cannot attend tonight. But she has conveyed her comments, and Kelly Harris is going to read them out. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. These are the words of Councillor Wendy Sutton. I've called this application in before this committee this evening for a variety of concerns that have been expressed by local residents. Apologies for not being able to join you in person this evening. Much of the concern raised throughout the various applications on this site centre around safe access and egress at the site, biodiversity and the impact the design of the proposed properties will have on the street scene and neighbouring properties. There is a huge need to protect our nationally recognised listed assets, and none more so than Grainridge, which in the last 10 years has been left to deteriorate and decay shamefully. The applicant suggests that the only way to pay for the preservation and renovation of the 2 listed buildings is by the building of 4 new properties. I am disappointed that no other avenue explored to preserve the 2 listed properties is detailed in the application. However, in relation to safe access and egress to the site, with the agreement of the District Conservation and Arboricultural Officers, the trees fronting the property and a 3-metre length of the 1930s wall will be removed to accommodate safe movement of vehicles onto and off the site. The wall will then be rebuilt in the same style and design as previous, but 3 metres shorter, allowing for a wider display, which has been agreed with County Highways. This will change the outlook and character of the street scene of Sandy Lane. In relation to the biodiversity of the rear of the site, the current ecosystem will be fundamentally changed with the removal of a substantial number of trees and bushes, all of which are described as being self-setting and of medium to low importance by the district arboricultural officer. Some provision has been made to replant trees following the construction phase in the application and to accommodate local wildlife, e.g. bats and hedgehogs, although no mention has been made of the provision for owls. Finally, the proposed 4 new properties, there have been concerns expressed about overshadowing, loss of light, loss of privacy, noise pollution, disposal of surface water and flooding. It has been suggested that this application would have a detrimental impact on existing residents and the conservation area. There will be a lasting impact upon the skyline and street scene of Sandy Lane, as well as Oakleys to the rear of this application. I appreciate the work the district officers have had to do regarding this application, motivated in no small part by the need to preserve these 2 listed buildings by enabling development. However, I am extremely uneasy that in order to maintain and preserve 2 listed buildings which have been left to deteriorate and decay for the last 10 years, this committee is being asked to grant permission for the building of 4 new houses so that the applicant can carry out their legal responsibility of maintaining and preserving these wonderful assets. I ask this committee to view and debate this application, but should this application be approved, would argue for a later time for the delivery of goods, etc., to the site for construction purposes, condition 23, at 9:30 a.m. and 3 p.m. due to Sandy Lane being the main thoroughfare for all 4 school coaches transport exiting the village. Once again, those were the words of Councillor Wendy Sutton.
Thank you, Kelly. We have another local member in the room, which is Councillor Diane Holmes. Do you wish to speak?
Yes, briefly, Chairman, if that's
Okay,
possible.
thank you.
From my viewpoint, as a long-standing parish councillor for Brood and Cowan Parish, I do understand the background of this application. It's been a long time in getting to this point. I have to say that and having read the reports of the officers and being at the site visit yesterday and hearing yet more, to fill out the reports that were written down, we learned a lot more about the situation. I have to say, I am for this application.
Thank you. So over to you then, members, to comment on the application. Anybody wish to speak? Councillor Kelly.
That's it. Got it. Thank you, Chair. Sorry about that. Couple of points. Firstly, the entrance of vehicles that will be delivering goods, if it is passed, I would recommend that the time restrictions are put on. And the other issue is access to the site. Can officers give me precise from the corner of the building to the edge of the part of the section where the fencing ends, what width that is? Because an average, as the diagram I'm looking at now, which shows a fire engine, not a refuge truck, which a refuge truck is wider. They need a bigger display of 18 to 23 meters turning point because they're rigid. My concerns are on that point, and my other that point of where they've got to access that, where they're really going to be close to that part of the property, is a major concern for me.
Helen, do you want to come back?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, through you. The current plan, I don't have the measurement. I had the scale plan yesterday. I could have done that for you then, so I apologise I haven't got that with me now. But it has been assessed. It is a scale plan, and it has been assessed by the County Highways team, who have looked at it on the scale of the refuge truck. So it's not just a regular visibility display and width and apportionment for a regular vehicle. It has been assessed on that basis. There is clearance, there is passing space, which obviously at the moment, if I show you back to the current situation, that's not the case. So what we saw out on site yesterday will not be the final version of what is being installed. It will be widened and improved. But just to rest assured that there were some issues with visibility, there were some issues with the access road. They have been addressed under the current proposal, and now County Highways have assessed it based on the additional information and are comfortable with it. So the clearance is acceptable from their perspective, given the relationship with the access point. Thank you.
Are you happy with that? Councillor Harper Wallis. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Can the officers speak to the comments made by the applicant, Dr. Charles Spencer, please, around, because planning is all about legal and there's a lot of legal terms brought up. Could you talk about those, please?
Helen.
Thank you. Yeah, through you, Chair. Yeah, a couple of points that were raised there by the speaker that I think it's worth coming back on. First of all, the access, which we've already covered and is detailed in the officer report. The issue of overlooking and the height difference between the properties. It does meet all the space about dwellings, and the separation distances have been detailed in detail in the report. In the update list, there is a condition or a further note that's related to the levels. And it's worthy of note that that will be added in addition to what's already proposed. But in terms of the enabling development, which I think is the key point that members will want some further clarification on, when it comes to enabling development, we've obviously got to look at what we've got and what we are looking to achieve in terms of making sure that the listed buildings are brought back into active use. That's done by way of a viability assessment, and it's an independent appraisal that's put forward to us, and again independently assessed, not done by the local planning authority, by a specialist consultant in that field. And what they do is assess the details of the numbers with regard to what's got to be constructed and what is required to be invested in that building to bring it back into active use. And it's like I explained on site yesterday, a listed building being in active use is the best way to preserve it, is to make sure it doesn't continue to deteriorate. That independent assessment has been done and verified. That document is not in the public domain because of the commercial sensitivity of the numbers associated with that and the figures that are outlined with regard to the refurbishment works. And again, that is common practice. That is why we don't assess it in-house, it's done independently. We're comfortable with the outcome of that, and that it is the 4 dwellings that are necessary in order to re-establish the use of these 2 listed buildings on this site. You'll note from the planning history there was a previously withdrawn application, and that was the reason for that, that was above and beyond what was required necessary in order to support bringing back into use these 2 listed buildings. So we're comfortable that that's happened. The tests that were outlined within the guidance are assessed independently by the consultant. It's a specialist independent view that's taken on a very niche part of the planning system. They are fully qualified in that field, and they will have considered all of the guidance, and we ensure that happens as part of the assessment and therefore the recommendation that's made back to us. So if I can offer any comfort to members that that process has been followed with due regard to the proposal and the legislative requirements. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ellen. Do you want to come back?
Just a follow-up question. The wall, is the wall got any protections like conservation or anything around it?
Ellen.
The wall would need to benefit from consent for removal, but it's obviously being considered as part of this application before you this evening. But to be clear, it is an addition that's much later than the actual listed structures. And those of us who were on site yesterday, you can see the almost patchwork quilt of the wall and the fabric itself as it's been upgraded, updated and repaired over the years. So yes, it would need consent, but that is what's being considered as part of this approval. And to increase the width of the driveway, reinstate the appropriate visibility display, it's been amended, but to the frontage where you can see there on that right hand side picture, it will be reinstated in a very similar fashion, just moved back so we can achieve the visibility for the safe access and egress of the site. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, happy. Any more speakers? Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Chair. Just is the entrance wall being done first before any other works are going to be done? Because that will then help any hindrance of entrance and exit to the site.
Yeah, the timing's key when it comes to making sure that the safe access and egress. So it would be done prior to occupation of the property, so any use of that site in its increased fashion, so more comings and goings than there are at the moment, that would have to be in place and instated so that they're not accessing it as it is at the moment, because it's not in a safe manner as it stands. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chairman Duncan wishes to speak. Thank you.
Ellen, can you comment on the time suggested for access to the site during development?
Yeah, it's a fair point. I was going to wrap up with this if it wasn't raised. I can understand the concerns that have been raised by Councillor Sutton in terms of access to and from that road. We were there yesterday. You can see how much traffic comes up and down. However, it's only 4 dwellings that we're looking at here, and the access and egress is not going to be a lot of trips, even when construction is underway. I think it would be very difficult to impose a 9:30 to 3 in terms of reasonableness of a condition. You're not going to have an awful lot of comings and goings here when it comes to deliveries of materials, and when you do, it's for a very, very time limited period. So my view would be it doesn't meet the reasonableness test for a condition, and we could be challenged on that should we progress with it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any more speakers? Kelly.
Sorry, Chair, I've got to come back on this point. I dispute that part because the simple fact is, if you've got a 40-ton wagon dropping off 2,000 bricks on a wagon, then that is going to be hard for a wagon to, as I say, go right. Some wagon drivers aren't able, even though they're qualified, to reverse all the way up there or drive up there, because the simple fact is it'll be too steep for the load, and they'll just go, I'll drop them on the footpath, and articulated lorry dropping goods there, unless there's some measure in place to say a forklift truck to take the goods up to, then time limits would need to be there for the schools.
Councillor Kelly, that's opinion, and I'm sure the other members will consider it. Thank you. Any more speakers? No. Therefore, Councillor Steele, sorry.
Thank you, Chairman. I was on the site meeting yesterday, so I have to say I was very impressed with the plan to renovate the Grade 2 listed building before any work takes place whatsoever on the proposed additional properties. So in view of that, can you put that the last view on of the drive? Will that drive be widened and the access at the top be improved before the development at the back will be done? Because that wouldn't be, there would be no need for any major deliveries, you know, until that access is made much better. But or has the house got to be renovated first before any work in connection with the 4 new proposed properties can take place? Is that I mean, could that be conditioned, for instance?
Ellen.
Yeah, thank you to you, Chair. Yeah, it's like we discussed earlier, the timing of the access is going to be important. I appreciate that. What you're referring to is the fact that the building has to be refurbished before any of the properties can be sold on. That's the kind of facilitation of the enabling works, and that's the legal agreement that ties that up. So we don't do it by condition. It's all tied up within the Section 106 agreement. So the timing of the builds, the timing of the refurb, and therefore the timing of any associated works would be subject to the legal agreement, because we have to make sure, if we're minded to approve this evening, that the listed building gets refurbished before anything else happens. Does that answer your question? Sorry.
Well, in part, but from recollection, the modern building, relatively modern buildings at the top of the drive probably aren't listed. I wouldn't have thought so. So I don't see that if they were demolished, it would have a bearing on the work to the listed part. But then again, I'm quite simple, and well.
No, that's fine. So you're right. The listed structure is the main building itself, as shown there on the right-hand side, and then the outbuilding, which is that building itself. So you're right, when we were on site, the smaller outbuildings at the top of the drive weren't part of the listed curtilage, so they will be demolished and they will facilitate the access into the new part of the site. So the listing only covers the outbuilding that you can see on the slides now and the main building itself, number 7 to the frontage. So the wall, if you remember, we walked through the gate and there was that little outbuilding. None of that forms part of the listed curtilage. So that could be removed.
Okay, happy?
Well, that's my first point. Second one is regarding the curved wall. So again, if you could put that back up, please, that view. It's not obvious from that picture, but the conifer trees, which are within a few feet of the curved wall, in my estimation, are 60 foot tall and probably in excess of that. If nothing's done with that wall there, I would reckon within 18 months it'll be collapsing anyway. Now, this is not a planning reason or anything, but it's an observation. So I think that work has got to be done at some point in the near future, whether this application went through. So I don't see any harm being caused by that curved wall being pushed back 3 metres to assist with display and being rebuilt virtually identical to that. Lots of the bricks there's a buttress which you can't see. That's new, so that is not a heritage buttress because the bricks don't match the original bricks. So you know, I think that should definitely be done. There was some suggestion about the street scene view from Sandy Lane being affected. I didn't get that impression because Sandy Lane is quite low lying compared to the rear of the properties where the new proposed properties will be built. I can't see how that would affect the street scene in reply to what somebody mentioned. And I know Brood quite well, and I know how restrictive Sandy Lane is, and I would, if at all possible, support a change in times from 9:30 to 3 p.m, which is condition 23. Even a small pickup truck parked there, let alone a 40-ton wagon. And if there's cars on the other side of the road, no one's going to get through, because the other access into the centre of Brood, past the Admiral Rodney, is you take your life in your hands sometimes when you go up that road. So that's local knowledge, which wasn't obvious yesterday to most people, except the people who live in Brood. So yeah, that's all I've got to say, really. Okay.
You want to come back on any of that?
Only on the point about the wall, I think you're absolutely right. When we were stood by it, you could see some of the movement already, and there was several cracks that were quite obvious. So I do think some repair maintenance work is going to be needed. And the trees, as the tree officer said on the site, certainly wouldn't be helping that situation. And I can only reiterate what I've said about the condition already. My view is that it would be overly onerous and not appropriate, but I'll leave that to the chair to take a view on in terms of proposing a vote. Did you want to come in on that part?
No, I just wanted to reiterate the point that, clearly, in terms of any planning condition, there's a number of tests which are laid out in guidance, and any condition has to adhere to those tests. And as Helen has actually indicated, we have a situation here where we've simply got 4 dwellings and we've got conditions which are very much standard in developments, of this type, and to actually impose very restrictive delivery conditions could, clearly sort of cause issues in terms of, hindering the timing of when the development is delivered. So it's a difficult situation, but we've made the position clear in terms of the fact that we do not consider that the condition needs to be varied.
Councillor Burnett.
Thank you, Chair. With respects to Grain Ridge and its refurb, would the Grain Ridge have to be completely refurbed before another brick is laid on the other houses? And obviously it would have to be sensitively refurbed. What if materials for the refurb were delayed, can you assure us that there wouldn't be another brick laid on the other 4 houses until the total refurb is done? Thank you.
Ellen?
Chair, good question. Basically, all that is going to be governed by the terms of the legal agreement. You know, we've got a clear recommendation which, you know, suggests this is enabling developments. So the manner in which the Section 106 agreement is actually going to be structured is such that a specification will have to be provided, a full detailed specification. That the works to the bridge will have to be then carried out according to that specification, and then it's also common for the Section 106 agreements to set out a process where notification has to be given to the local authority in terms of the completion works, and the local authority would then go down and inspect the works and give a final certificate. So the intention here, Chair, is to actually ensure that given the nature of this development, the Section 106 is very tightly worded and also very closely monitored to achieve the objective of the development.
You want to come back? Are you happy? Okay. Right. Councillor Kelly.
Sorry, Bob, Chair. My clear point is, as it's been highlighted by other members, so the main house has got to be done first. So that's going to have plasterers, electricians, where all those vehicles are going to be parking is a key point. If they're going to be in the high street, then there's going to be issues in that street with parking and passing of vehicles, as well as scaffolding probably for doing the chimneys and that. There's another point with a truck doing delivery of scaffolding. That takes time.
I would just reiterate the point. It's no different to works being carried out, refurb works. It's quite extensive. I accept that. You know, we saw it on site that there's going to be a lot of work done there. But you know, in any scenario, if that property is being refurbished, people are going to have to visit, tradesmen are going to have to be there, and the appropriate people are going to have to park. It's just a situation that you've got the fact that it's in a village. However you look to do any refurb work along Sandy Lane, you're going to have that scenario. So I don't think it's significantly different in that case. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. No further speakers. So therefore, members, we go to the vote. And as I have not had a proposal or a reason for refusal, the recommendation is that we should approve this application. All those in favour, please show. Any against? No. Any abstentions? Okay, that's clearly approved. Thank you. I'll pause while some people wish to. Okay, we go to the second item on the agenda, second application, which is 24/00190 FULM, which is a major application, and it regards the batteries land adjacent to Ingsford substation, which is a battery application site. Ellen, can you give us the details, please?
Thank you, Chair. The site covers 2.59 hectares of land sited north and west of Hinksford substation, accessed from Swindon Road in Hinksford. The site is at a similar level to the substation and it slopes upwards towards the north. Hinksford is an other village or hamlet in policy terms, and the site is located 700 metres east as the crow flies from the development boundary of Swindon and is located 0.2 miles from War Heath within the Dudley Borough. The application seeks permission for the creation of a 49.5 megawatt battery energy storage facility, along with landscaping and associated works. The development would involve the installation of a series of battery units and inverters, along with CCTV cameras, perimeter fencing, and a substation which would connect directly into Hinksford substation. The facility would provide a means for allowing electricity from the grid to be imported and stored within the batteries at times of low demand and exported back into the grid at times of system stress or high demand. The development is proposed to be time limited for a period of 40 years. The site is located within the Greenbelt, where there is a presumption against development subject to a number of exceptions. The proposal is considered to be an appropriate form of development and would reduce the openness of the Greenbelt. As set out in the NPPF, when located in the Greenbelt, many renewable energy projects will comprise inappropriate development. In such cases, developers will need to demonstrate very special circumstances if projects are to proceed. Energy storage is considered critical to be able to avoid waste and increase energy supply during peak times of demand and help reduce overall energy costs. In line with the NPPF, the local planning authorities should approve applications for renewables if there are impacts that can be made acceptable. The site is considered to be a sufficient distance from neighbours to ensure there would be no harm to occupier amenity, and this will be secured through the significant landscaping buffers around the development. So this slide just shows you the location of the proposals here. This is a kind of quite a zoomed out view, so it gives you the context of the wider area. This is the nearest residential property here. And then this is the existing substation located adjacent to the application site. This gives you an aerial photograph to give you some context of the site. And this is a slightly greater scale, which gives you some detail that's proposed. So this area here is actually where the batteries would be located themselves. And this compound here would not contain any battery containers itself. It would be welfare facilities for operatives visiting the site. This also shows the landscaping that's proposed as part of the proposal, and then the sustainable drainage. Members who could visited the site yesterday, and we saw its location. It was noted that the nearest residential property, which is Hinksford Mill Cottage, was at a lower level in relation to the proposed compounds and the existing substation. The environmental health team are satisfied that there will be no detrimental impact in relation to noise due to the mitigation proposed and the submitted robust noise report. Staffordshire Fire Service are satisfied the development would not result in a fire risk and have therefore recommended approval subject to conditions. 0.9 hectares of the land is grade 2 agricultural, which is equals to 35% of the site, and 1.2 hectares of the land is grade 3A, which is 46% of the site. As such, the application site has a total loss of 81% of best and most versatile land. There is considered to be appropriate provision of good quality land in this part of the district, and consequently there is no undue concerns regarding food production. It's noted that there is a public right-of-way which is sited within the northern part of the red line boundary, approximately 35 metres north of the batteries. This is proposed to be retained, and the County Council's public rights-of-way team have not raised any concerns about the development. It is noted that the site at present, as well as the neighbouring properties' gardens, are subject to flooding. The proposed scheme would improve this situation by adding in sustainable drainage options, which also include a 40% uplift for climate change events. The Leeds Local Flood Authority have appraised the information submitted and consider the proposal is acceptable subject to conditions. Whilst the harm to the Greenbelt is given significant weight, it is considered that the development's impact have been made acceptable in the context of national policy, and the potential contribution to climate change for energy security is a significant factor which tips the balance in favour of the proposal. Accordingly, the recommendation is for approval for a temporary period of 40 years, after which time the equipment will be removed and the site reverted back to its agricultural use. So I just want to take those members who weren't able to attend the site visit yesterday through some photos of the site. So the photo you're seeing on the left-hand side here is the site access from Swindon Road. So that's an existing access point that would be utilised, and it's currently used for the substation itself. And the photo on the right-hand side is a view across the higher level of the field immediately adjacent to the access point. So these two photographs show you some of the paraphernalia that's already associated with the substation. You can note there's quite a few pylons already there, and this area to the left is quite built up and covered in a concrete pad with buildings and associated electricity paraphernalia already in place. This is another view across towards the substation, again from the higher level. This is approximately the position of where the compound would be located. Photograph there on the left-hand side is from an area which will be planted as a result of the landscaping scheme. What you're seeing here is the two kind of chimneys at the top of the neighbouring property, which is Hinksford Mill Cottage, which is the property that we actually visited on the site visit yesterday. And then finally, on the right-hand side, these are the typical style buildings that you would look to see within the compound itself, which would contain the welfare buildings associated with the development if it was to be approved. Recommendation is to approve. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ellen. We have one speaker, Gordon Fantham. So, Mr. Fantham, can you go to the lectern, please? You have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Over the last years as a conservationist, I've opposed many greenbelt developments, even spoke in this chamber, but this is a completely new uncharted danger to human life, property, wildlife and the existing infrastructure. The first point here is Swindon Parish Council have opposed this, but I'm speaking tonight as a resident that lives close by. As a material consideration, it is the case that the proposed site is within a tranquil area used by the public for at least the last 40 years, as far as I can remember, as public open space for dog walking, etc., with many clearly used pathways in a beautiful, tranquil area. This development would industrialise and take away the important tranquil area from both the people of Hinksford and Swindon, and also the people from nearby Wallheath who use this area as well. The main material consideration to refuse this application is that it should be resubmitted as a major hazardous facility, as lithium batteries are volatile and unstable substances liable to catch fire, as seen a few days ago in the Vistra Bess Inferno in California, where the fire sheriff of California, which is a lot bigger than the one fire station at Womburn, said, let it burn because you can't put lithium fires out. As a quite simply, a Bess lithium runaway inferno, as seen last week in America, cannot be put out. This is not scaremongering. This is now a proven fact by the fire in America. A Bess lithium runaway inferno will create intense heat and maybe enough to buckle a steel pylon and produce a cloud of toxic hydrogen fluoride gas. If it rains during any Bess inferno, the contaminated rainwater would soak into the ground and pollute the entire ground forever. This is a material consideration under NPPF, pollution and health, living conditions and the natural environment. I read in the grocery brochures, yet nothing is said about how they intend to put out a Bess inferno or evacuation procedure plan when one catches fire. It appears to be a let it burn and leave it to the residents to find their own way to escape from the poison hydrogen gas clouds, which, depending on wind direction, could head towards Hinksford Mobile Park, which the entrance to Hinksford Mobile Home Park is directly opposite where the fire would be. So to evacuate the people of Hinksford, you'd have to drive them towards where the fire is, which is a bad idea. If the wind went in the other direction, it would go, the toxic cloud would head towards Swindon Village or Womburn. If it went in the other direction, it could go across the rugby field as far as the school at King Swinford and destroy the wildlife of Ridge Hill Woodland. Summary. Someone made a comment to me that there are no planning grounds that could oppose this application on, but to the contrary, there are many material considerations which suggest that the application should never have been put in the first place as a normal application, as it clearly a major hazardous facility due to the extreme risks of lithium battery runaway fire and explosions, which is now proven and not a normal run-of-the-mill application like it is being treated. The risk to human life, the environment, wildlife damage and the existing infrastructure of the substation from a lithium battery runaway fire inferno is far too great, as seen in America only last week. We need to learn an example from the Crooked House fire, where the pub was left to burn exactly like a best fire will be, as the fire tender could not reach the fire. In the same manner, our emergency services cannot cope with a best fire, and no evacuation for the people around it is in place. This makes as much sense as putting flammable cladding around brick buildings. If a BESS is such a good idea, then why aren't the National Grid doing it themselves instead of relying on private companies to carry the can when it starts burning? The residents of Hingsford Mobile Home have only one entrance opposite the proposed site. This is a major issue. The people of Hingsford Mobile Home Park, 130 residents, will have one way out, and that's towards the fire. There is no back access to Hingsford Mobile Home Park. Thank you for your attention. Good night.
Thank you, Mr. Fanton. Spot on time. Thank you. Right, we now have the applicant agent, please. Dan Levy of Balance Power. Thank you. You also have 5 minutes.
Good evening, Chair and members of the Planning Committee. My name is Dan Levy and I'm the Planning Manager for Balance Power. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. Balance Power is an experienced developer of renewable and low carbon energy projects across the UK. We take pride in being a responsible developer, committing to engaging with local planning authorities and communities. As members will be aware, battery storage is a critical component of our sustainable energy future. They ensure a reliable supply of clean energy when the sun isn't shining and the wind isn't blowing. Not only does this reduce our reliance on fossil fuels, but it also strengthens our efforts to combat climate change. This battery energy storage project can provide power to over 26,000 houses and can save over 18,000 tonnes of carbon annually. It will also directly support South Staffordshire's renewable energy topic paper, which highlights the need for increased battery storage to transition to net zero. There is also very strong national policy support for this development. The revised NPPF, issued in December 2024, states that when determining planning applications, significant weight is to be given to the benefits associated with renewable and low carbon energy generation. This battery storage facility directly supports this. Additionally, the government's Clean Power Action Plan 2030 sets out a need for 23 to 27 gigawatts of new battery storage by 2030. This scheme will contribute nearly 50 megawatts to this objective. The UK is currently suffering with extremely long delays to connect energy projects, some by over 10 years. This scheme successfully passed National Grid's Expression of Interest study, which identifies battery storage schemes around the country which are vitally important to stabilise the electricity network. As a result, the connection date for this site has been brought forward 7 years, from 2033 to 2026, emphasising the benefit this scheme will have on the local energy network. We carefully selected this site due to its proximity to the adjacent substation, which serves as the point of connection for this development. This is a fundamental requirement for a battery storage facility. The site already has existing energy infrastructure, including electricity pylons, the adjacent substation, and an emergency standby gas generation facility. Therefore, it can be accepted that energy infrastructure forms part of the backdrop to this local area. Before submitting the planning application, we actively engaged with the local community, the Greenbelt Community Group and the local parish council to carefully address their concerns and questions. This collaboration has led to a 50% reduction in its overall capacity, ensuring there's a clear separation from the surrounding countryside. One of the most exciting aspects of this application is its high biodiversity net gain score 154% in habitat enhancements. We all recognise the value of our natural environment, and this project goes beyond mere compliance with environmental regulations. The absence of any objection from technical consultees demonstrates the extent and effectiveness of the development being brought forward. We have collaborated closely with Staffordshire Fire and Rescue Service to optimise the design, ensuring it meets their requirements. In terms of Greenbelt, the scheme has undergone rigorous assessments. Very special circumstances have been clearly detailed in the officer's reports, and the scheme should be supported, hence the recommendation for approval. This scheme will overall deliver critical energy infrastructure to support a net zero future, and we very much hope you will be able to support the application today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Levy. We therefore go to the local member, which is Councillor Roger Lees. You want to speak? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. Firstly, may I thank members who attended the site visit yesterday, which I think was very useful to them. I also need to say how I appreciate the need for battery storage facilities, but they must be in the right place. However, appeals are disputing this, having found that significant weight should be afforded to the benefit of the proposal in respect of climate change and achieving net zero. However, a total of 36 objections have been received and a petition in objections from 53 signatures. The local MP, Mike Wood, Swindon Parish Council objected to the proposal, and 4 councillors from within the Dudley Borough objected, and Hinksford Mill Cottage, the closest property, has submitted numerous photographs showing flooding. I don't know whether you've got any photographs you can show.
Ellen, do you want to do that when you come back to the councillor? Ellen will do it then. Okay.
So I'd like the Planning Committee to consider the points they raise, whether it can attribute more weight than the Planning Officer to matters relating to a loss of agricultural land, noise, greenbelt harm and flooding. That would be enough to move the planning balance enough to refuse the application, as is the right of the decision makers. Firstly, can we deal with loss of agricultural land? As has been said, the site includes grade 2, 3A and 3B of best and most versatile land. 81% of the site is best and most versatile, and paragraph 187B of the NPPF states the decision recognising the intrinsic character and beauty of the countryside, including the economic and other benefits of the best and most versatile agricultural land and trees and woodland. This should contribute significant weight. Noise. It is accepted that noise can be a problem, but can be mitigated. I note from the report that the Planning Officer states there are mitigations to control this put in place. However, the specification for the batteries and the noise levels to be used are not yet known, so very difficult to mitigate against. The report states they're reduced from 5 to 3. I wonder where the evidence is for that. The greenbelt harm and the case for very special circumstances. Inappropriate development is by definition harmful to the greenbelt and should not be approved except in special circumstances. The erection of battery-based electrical storage facilities does not fall into any of the exceptions noted within paragraphs 154 and 155 of the NPPF policy GB1 and is therefore considered to be inappropriate development, which should be afforded substantial weight in the balancing of planning balance. The development would also cause some slight harm to the openness of the green belt by causing some degree of encroachment on the countryside, which can be viewed from 3 properties opposite. This would conflict with one of the purposes included land in the green belt, in line with paragraph 153 of the framework. The harm to the green belt from these matters results in substantial weight against the proposal. The committee should consider whether this accords with Core Strategy Policy GB1 or the NPPF. Flooding issues. The site is located in Flood Zone 1 at low risk of flooding from the rivers and sea. At 1 in 1,000 years surface water event. The topography of the survey shows that the ground level of the site generally falls northwesterly towards the Holbeach Brook, which is surrounding the site. There are areas of the site predicted to be at risk, of surface water. Flooding on the site and flood risk assessment has been based on a 1 in 1,000 year surface water flood event to mitigate this. However, the owner of the nearest property has submitted evidence that disputes this prediction, whereby she submits photos and data on water levels showing how the land has been flooded 3 times this winter. Whilst the best boundary is just above the flooded area of land in the field, any loss of soakaway and additional water being added to the brook, which is culverted under the road and canal into the Smestow Brook, which is often gets blocked, will compound the existing problem, risking flooding of the site, as previously happened with Waterworks Cottage. Although the records do not show this, the committee should consider whether the risk of flooding to adjacent properties should be enough to move the planning balance again to refuse this application. In concluding, a total of 36 objections have been received and a position in objections of 53 signatures. The local MP, Swindon Parish Council have objected to the proposal and 4 councillors from the next adjacent borough. These local residents' objections should not be ignored. So I'd ask the Planning Committee to consider whether the points raised are enough to move the planning balance to refuse this application. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Lees. Helen, can you respond, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, there's a few points there that have been raised by the various speakers, if I may come back on those points. So in terms of the objector who was speaking initially, there was talk of the site being accessed by local residents and used and being a tranquil area. It's very much noted that there are 2 public rights of way adjacent to and across the site, neither of which will be affected by the development proposals, and they will remain in place. So access to the site will remain. If I go to this site plan, whilst this area is shown bound by this red line, because this is the application site, this all remains open. The only areas that will be fenced off would be the actual batteries themselves here, which is a tight perimeter fence around, and an acoustic fence which prevents any noise, because it's the batteries themselves that generate the noise when the fans are coming on and off. And there'd be a fence around the compound itself. So the remainder of this site would remain open as it is at the moment. This light green area here shows the route of the public right of way, so you can see that that won't be affected. So in terms of access, that will remain. It was also mentioned about a major hazardous facility. The MPPF refers to major hazard sites, so I think that's what was being referred to. To be clear, a BESS site is not a major hazard site. There's a very defined list of what constitutes a major hazard site, and a BESS isn't one of them. That's why the Health and Safety Executive are not a statutory consultee, and we rely wholly on the fire service to make a provision in terms of any emergency access and provisions. They have been consulted on the application and have recommended conditions to ensure that it's effectively moved forward. So we have no concerns with regard to access and fire. In terms of the current site, it's not currently used for food production. Those of you who visited the site yesterday would have seen that when we walked around the site. The noise was a concern at the early stages of this application, and the second noise impact assessment was commissioned. That's now been assessed by the environmental health team, and with the mitigation proposed, it's now acceptable in terms of the 3 neighbouring noise sources, and we're confident that that would be the case. It's accepted that it's inappropriate development in the Greenbelt. That's been acknowledged within the officer report, but the officers maintain that very special circumstances do exist to outweigh that harm. The landscape harm has also been considered, and I think again for those members who visited yesterday, when you do see the site within the context of the existing substation, which is shown on this photo on the left hand side, and then again there you have got the compound and the batteries themselves against the backdrop of that existing built form within the Greenbelt, so that has been considered. In terms of the flooding, I just want to finish on this point. We were kindly provided with these photos from a neighbouring occupier who's very close to the site. So the one on the left hand side shows the boundary over the neighbour's fence into the site. To be clear, where that pooling is not within the red line. It's further to the east of that site, but it is evident that there's pooling there. And this is within the garden area of the neighbouring property. So it's acknowledged very much so that there is an existing problem with flooding and surface water runoff. But there is a proposal to improve the current situation, to add some betterment to it, and it has taken into consideration the 40% uplift as a result of the climate change consequences and events. So that has been factored into the proposal. So yes, there is an existing problem. The application itself and the provisions made for sustainable drainage will look to rectify and add betterment there. But these two photos are taken outside of the red line, so I just wanted to make that clear. The local lead flood authority have reviewed the details with regard to the flood risk assessment based on surface water as well, and are comfortable with the conditions recommended. And the final point was about the number of objections that's been outlined in the report, and all the material considerations raised have been addressed and put into the planning balance. That was it from me, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. Therefore, members, it's over to you. Do I have speakers, please? Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to clarify one point on the previous slide there. So the size of this area was given at 2.5 hectares or 6.4 acres. Does that refer to the whole site in the red side? What would be the imprint of the square footage or square meterage of the two grey bits in that part? Thank you.
I haven't got that to hand, I'm afraid. The number that you have just cited is the whole site area. But you can see proportionate to that area, it's two quite small areas. The bigger area is where the batteries themselves would be, but unfortunately I don't have that number to hand. I apologise.
Okay. Yep. Councillor Harper Wallis.
Yeah, this application's, I guess, deja vu. We've all seen these applications come through, and we've gone through the planning reasons for why it's probably more weighted in favour to approve. And again, this site has got a lot of good infrastructure. It's next to the substation, so that kind of is a no-brainer for me anyway. The comments around flooding, I think, are either that I don't think they add or take away from the net balance. They might even change the net balance. If there is a flooding problem, then surely the quality of the agricultural land will be degraded, and therefore, if there's planning balance to protect that, then that gets lost because of the flooding. So, and then obviously, if this site is now reducing the flooding, then I guess it's probably swinging it more into the favour that there is flooding there, I guess, weirdly. But yeah, I guess members, regardless of whether we approve or don't approve today, this will probably go ahead either here or through appeal because of all the reasons that we've discussed in previous applications. So I guess the question to members tonight is, do we want to approve it here with our conditions and with a bit of control rather than letting, I guess, government or an inspector choose?
Thank you. Do you want to make any comments? Councillor Day.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was on the site visit yesterday, and while I sort of sympathise with the cases against the project we've heard, I think that is the land actually used at the moment for anything? It's just basically a dog walking area and what have you. I do feel that the installation is necessary in our current climate. In that respect, I will be in favour. The work that we've been told is going to be carried out to sort of improve the landscaping and what have you, I 100% agree with. There are no objections from the fire brigade and what have you, providing the conditions are followed. And I think it will obviously, as we mentioned, it's going to benefit in times of need 26,000+ houses. So you know we can all sort of say, well, we don't want these things, but they have to go somewhere, unfortunately. And I think that I will be sort of voting in favour of it. I think it's in the fact that it's also relevant. It's adjacent to the current substation. It is one of the best situations I've seen in these type of matters for this type of development, and I will be voting in favour of it.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Any comments? No? Councillor Burnett.
Thank you, Chair. Helen, Mr. Fantham mentioned a mobile home park. Could you show us on the previous map roughly how far that away would be from from the proposed best site, please?
Yeah, of course. So on this plan, which is at a larger scale, so you can see the application site here. Directly opposite is the public house, and there's an access track along the public house, the side of the curtilage there, that leads on to the mobile home park, which is here. Can you see that with my cursor? So that's the mobile home park there. But what Mr. Fantham is referring to, and is correct, is the access in and out comes out along here, adjacent to the public house, and then onto the main road at that point. So that's how they access in and out. That is the only access in and out of the mobile home park. But yeah, that's the proximity in relation to the site.
Happy with that? Okay. Any more speakers? Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Chair. The retention pond, that's, is there going to be any mitigation elements on that? Because, as I say, people can drown in 2 inches of water. You know, if we're going to have dog walkers still on that area as a community area, then something could happen and, you know.
Ellen?
Yeah, of course. 2 issues there. There's attenuation pond is in, sustainable drainage. They actually spend most of their time dry because they drain away. They're not designed actually to hold water permanently. They do fill, obviously, when we have the quite severe downpours that we're now accustomed to, which has been factored into this with the 40% increase. But most of the time they are dry, and there's a lot of planting around these, so it's not very easy to access. What we don't want is to be adding physical barriers and things like that, because then you are adding that kind of paraphernalia that isn't accustomed to that soft landscaping. Excuse me, but we do this a lot with housing developments where we keep them in their natural form and use the planting as a barrier, so there's no concerns from a safety perspective. In terms of the water runoff, should there be a fire, that tank is under the ground, so that won't be accessible to anyone who's walking the site. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Ashley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Unfortunately, I was unable to attend the site meeting yesterday, but I'd like to ask a few questions and perhaps get some clarification, because I think there are 1 or 2 issues here that don't seem very clear. Now, the first one is this is a BESS on its own. I seem to recall that we passed a planning application for a solar farm some time ago that would link into this BESS. Is that the correct way that the thing would be charged? Because there's no sign of solar panels here. The other one is decibels. Now, as I've read in the report, there's some background noise expected as was between 1 and 10 decibels. It's also been quoted that the decibels that could come from this site could be between 84 and 94. Now, that sounds loud to me, but I have no idea what that really means. So can I have some clarification on the prospective decibel noise that would come from this when it's in action? The other thing is, again, because I wasn't there, and I notice it's joining a substation, which seems to be the ideal location. I don't know the geography, but would it be possible to locate it still somewhere in the area of the present substation? Finally, it's been quoted as well, and we've looked on that plan, that some dwellings seem to be relatively close to the actual proposed BESS. Can we have some idea how many dwellings there are that are relatively close? Because I think there are guidelines how far these things should be away from dwellings and in our case, probably villages. But I'd be obliged if I could have some information, Mr. Chairman, on those points.
Thank you, Councillor Ashley. As you know, I've been heavily involved with previous applications. But I think it's only fair that the officers, Ellen, should answer some of those questions. I am able to answer some of them myself, but Ellen should do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. If you want to come in when I've completed my speech, then obviously please do. Yeah, so there's no solar associated with this one, is just battery storage. So the idea is when there is a lot of power going into the grid from renewable energy, so from wind or from solar elsewhere, and that's going into the grid itself. Often, if there's energy going into the grid and it's not being used, it gets wasted. So what happens with the batteries is we can defer it into the batteries. It can be stored until it's needed. So you are correct. There's no solar with this, but it will go in and out through the connection point in the substation to balance the grid. So that's the first one. Noise has been a consideration in this application from the beginning. Like I said in my opening speech, there were some concerns with noise in the beginning, and the first noise impact assessment that was done we weren't comfortable with. It was reviewed and extra mitigation was put in place, and further clarification on some of the points was requested. That has now been done. An environmental health team have reviewed that and are comfortable. The background noise was measured at 3 neighbouring properties. The closest one, if I can show you on this plan, and find my cursor. Can you see that there where I'm circling?
Yeah.
So that's the nearest property. So for those of us who were on the visit, we visited that property, went into their, along their drive, went into their garden area and saw how that was sited in relation to the actual BESS units themselves. So there will be a noise impact in terms of background noise on that property, but not to a point where it will be a problem, because the main battery units themselves have an acoustic barrier all the way around, quite tight, and that is impacting on the noise spread, and therefore it won't be a problem for the occupier of that dwelling, and we're comfortable with that situation now. So yes, you are correct about the background noise, but it won't be to a point where it's an issue. The existing substation is immediately adjacent to this. It's already quite developed. It might be better if I show you this photo. You can see from this one, this is the area underneath a lot of the pylons that are already present, and it's full of transformers that link then straight into the substation itself. So in terms of that curtilage, that's already quite tight. So what's proposed here is to nudge as close as they can with the batteries against it, and then the compound is pretty much from where this photo is taken. It very much reads within the context of the substation itself. So whilst it's not in the existing compound, it very much reads as part of it in terms of the location. And I've already addressed your former point, which is the location of the residential properties. The nearest one is Hinksford Mill Cottage. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Just a quick final one, if I may.
Yeah.
Can I thank members for that information? But as you know, I'm very keen to look at one of these things in operation, because, okay, we accept up to a point expert views. Take the fire service, for example. They say, oh yeah, they can adequately cover it. Then the reason I've just mentioned the decibels issue. But you know, you can't beat personal information and questioning the people who actually operate or construct these things. But that's the only point I'd like to make on that, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Councillor Ashley. There have been several members that want to request a site visit to one of those battery sites. Problem is, it's such new technology and linking to the grid. There has to be capacity to the grid, that they're all early in construction. I have seen one at Busselham, which is on the border of Bussell and West Bromwich. Problem is, it's an industrial area. But ideally, we'd like to look on that semi-rural. Shropshire, they had a lot of these applications sooner than we did. There might be one in construction in Shropshire, but at the moment, Ellen's finding difficulty finding one for us to visit, and it's purely because it's new technology. It's just coming through. They haven't really been constructed properly yet. That's the problem. We're still searching for it. The other point on the noise. Now, you know, we've looked at many of these applications. This isn't the first one. And gradually we're becoming more experienced of what to ask and what an inspector's not going to refuse us on, and lately it's coming down to noise. I have got questions about some of the applications on noise, but this particular one, it's all about what the background noise is at the cottage before there's any development. So the background noise is assessed, and then we get a report from a noise consultant from the applicant. That's assessed against that background noise, and in this occasion, it comes out as -1 decibel. The ruling is anything over 5 decibels is adverse, and anything over 10 decibels is significant adverse. And we are looking at all of these applications, but this particular one, I've got a rule of thumb in my head of where I think it's affected, because I've had three battery applications over my area. So I know the approximate distance. One on my area was 135 metres to the nearest houses, and that had an effect on them. This one's 118 metres to the nearest cottage, and it's just sufficiently distant not to come into that adverse and severe category. It has been looked at. Myself and the vice chairman have challenged this in meetings. The officers know that, so we are looking at this. Thank you. Any more speakers?
Thank you, Chair. I was on the site visit on this. Just a quick clarification for Helen, please. The noise element, was it done from Hicksford Cottage or was it done from Mill Cottage? Because I perceive from the actual battery side, Mill Cottage would be the closest one, not Hicksford.
It was done from both. In fact, there was 3 residential noise sources that were done, and it included both of those properties you've just mentioned.
Any more speakers? Councillor Stern.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Excuse me. As everybody in this room probably is aware, I have had, and I still have, concerns regarding these installations. I also assume that most of us in the room are familiar with the programme on the BBC called The Traitors. You probably know where I'm going here. I'm firmly, well, I was firmly faithful, but I've looked at all the potential planning reasons, well, not planning reasons, but information that we've had tonight. We actually had an email from a Mr. Stringfellow, who's the secretary of Wallheath, Kings Winford Greenbelt Group, who put forward some very good points. We also had a very passionate speech tonight from Mr. Fantham, made some good points. But unfortunately, we've put all these points forward before. So all the potential planning reasons really on which we could object to this planning application have been rebutted and exhausted in the past, either by our own statutory agencies, i.e. Staffordshire Fire and Rescue Service, or indeed on appeal by planning applicants, either this actual authority or by other appeal decisions throughout the country. So I'm a traitor. You'll have to work out which way I'm going to vote from that.
Thank you, Councillor Steele. Any more speakers? Councillor Atherton.
Thank you. I was on the site visit yesterday and it was really useful because although you've got really good photographs and plans, until you're actually there, standing on the land and seeing the lie of the land, it's difficult to appreciate. There's just 2 things you could clarify, and they both concern water. I know there were going to be mitigating things put in place to alleviate the flooding with attenuation ponds, and also how the fire service would actually deal with an incident, because we didn't realise what would happen to the water that they use and how that would be disposed of afterwards. And I think those are two quite interesting points. Thank you, Helen.
Yeah, thank you through you, Chair. So yeah, in terms of surface water runoff, it's in flood zone 1, so it's not subject to flooding from the brook or from rivers or anything like that. So it's surface water that's the issue, and we're aware there's a problem on the site at the moment. So the development itself will look to address some of that within the context of the site itself. Obviously, we can't go any wider than the existing site, but it will look to address that through the sustainable drainage and does take into account that uplift for the climate change events. And we've made sure that that has been covered. It was clear when we were on site and we'd spoke to Councillor Lees as a local ward member, there's a problem with the culvert at the moment and that getting blocked, and that's a maintenance issue and that does need to be addressed. We can't prevent the water going into the brook, that's kind of how it's designed to do, but what we can design in is the rate that it runs out at. So that is where the betterment would come as a result of this, because it would be contained and then drained at an appropriate rate, taking into consideration that climate change factor. And yeah, in terms of the unlikely event, but nonetheless we plan for the event of a fire, the water that's used for the fire would go into underground tank. It's held there as almost like contaminated water, and then after the event, once the site is safe, that's removed and disposed of appropriately. So that is not water that would go into the watercourse or form part of the standard drainage process as if we'd had a downpour. It's a very different process and that would be handled completely separately. But yeah, two very fair points in terms of the way that the water would be handled on the site. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for clarifying that, because I don't think we've realised that before with how any water would be disposed of if, God forbid, it had to be used by the fire service. So that was a really useful point. Thank you.
Any more speakers? No? Therefore, I'll go to the vote. And as I haven't had a proposal or reason for refusal, I'm going to put the recommendation that this application should be approved. All those in favour, please show. Anyone against? Are there any abstentions? That application is approved. Thank you. Okay, I'll carry on with the meeting then. We're on to the third item, which is 24//000764/ADV. It's a non-major and it's Womburn Enterprise, Bridge North Road, Womburn. Ellen.
Thank you very much, Chair. This application relates to a permission granted back in 2020 for a little food store in Womburn. It's located south of Bridge North Road with the main service village of Womburn. As this site is a council-owned land site, this is why the application is before committee members. So this is the site currently under construction, quite far through the construction process now, I understand. But to the west of the site, there's an existing commercial industrial unit. To the southeast, there's the Severn Trent water site. And then located to the northeast over Bridge North Road are the residential properties. And you can see here there's a band of trees and planting between the residential properties here. And then this location here, which is where the Lidl is currently being constructed. You can see from this plan that it's set back from Bridge North Road by about 25 metres. The application proposes various signage at the Lidl store, which is typical of a property of this nature. And as this application is an advertisement consent, assessment can only be made against amenity and public safety. So the trees located to the northwest and the southeast do reduce the views towards the site when travelling along Bridge North Road. And the trees would also reduce the impact of the signs on the character of the nearby residential area by obscuring these views. The signage is well proportioned in relation to the overall scale of the building and would be set back from Bridge North Road by 25 metres. Therefore, it's considered that the signage would not have a materially detrimental impact on the visual amenity of the area, and the nearest neighbour would be 120 metres away from the property behind this tree belt here. If you can see my cursor, yeah. No objections have been received from County Highways or from the Environmental Health team. So this shows the property under construction. What you can see here are is the framework for the two signs that are going to be put at the higher level. The rest are billboards, type signage, and the standard signage paraphernalia that you expect with supermarkets of this nature. So this shows the building itself and the entrance. There you can see one sign proposed. There's the other one. This is a view from the nearby residential street. So what that's doing is looking towards the actual little unit, and it just goes to show the tree band and tree belt that's present, blocking those views and obscuring those views. And again, the view of Bridgenorth Road. The properties are over this tree belt here to the left-hand side. To be clear, there's only one sign that fronts and faces the residential properties, which is this one here, located on that front return. And there's an example of the kind of signage you would expect to see at a supermarket setting. So we are comfortable with the proposals, no highway safety issues, no amenity issues, and therefore we are recommending approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ellen. I'm not sure, is anybody in the room that's the ward member for this particular area? So I haven't got any indication here, because it's procedure to go to the local member. There's nobody on the committee for that area. Okay, thank you. Anybody wish to speak? Councillor Kelly.
I propose we accept this, Chair. It's material, really.
Any other speakers? Councillor Burnett.
Thank you, Chair. It's just an observation, really. I'm glad to see that they're taking light pollution seriously, and the lights will be off 15 minutes after the store is closed. Thank you.
Anybody else? Councillor Steele.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Can we just go back to the previous slide? The one that's actually got the little signs above at the top of the building. Well, there was a better, that's just a plan, there was a better, that's, yeah. They're not illuminated, are they, the little signs? Or, oh, that is. Right. Okay, thank you.
Anyone else wish to speak? No, that was a quick one. Right, I'll go straight to the vote then. We have a recommendation to approve this application. All those in favour, please show. Sorry. No one against, it was unanimous. Any abstentions? No, thank you. That's approved. Thank you very much. We now go to the monthly update report. Do you want a minute? Okay. Monthly update report from the lead planning manager. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just trying to find the relevant part of my agenda. Quite a few updates in terms of appeal decisions this month because we didn't sit in December, so it was a couple of months worth of appeal decisions. The main procedural updates obviously relate to the changes coming out of central government, which relate to MPPF changes. There was a session last night for members, which was very well attended, and some great questions there. There will be a continuation of that process with regards to MPPF and local plan. It's also proposed that we will run a training session before the next committee in February, and we're hoping to cover planning conditions and the tests for planning conditions. So anyone who's got any queries or questions or specifics they would like to raise, please let me know beforehand and I'll make sure that's covered. As has become customary, I don't intend to go through every appeal decision because you've been party to those. Just wanted to raise the Leavedale decision, which was released towards the end of last year, and only because it was a committee decision, so I think it's only fair to flag that one. So this was the solar farm that was very well debated, but ultimately refused against officer recommendation, was subject to a hearing, and it's worth reading in full the appeal decision if you do get the opportunity, because there's a lot of interesting content there and views from the inspector about some of the key matters that we talk about often when it comes to renewable sites, both solar and battery, and the balancing exercise that was undertaken. There was no costs awarded against the authority there because the view was that, you know, you're entitled to take a different view. Contrary to officers, it's how that's balanced and articulated. But definitely worth a read, and I would implore you to do that if you've got the time, because it's very interesting about the way that it's balanced. But that was it from me, Chair, in terms of update. I don't know if you wanted to add anything on that appeal decision.
Not really, in as much as we are reading all these appeal decisions, and gradually by the government wanting these to go through, inspectors are approving them. Unless we've got really good reasons to refuse, we need to be responsible in that respect.